Y'all here for a date with me?
Yeah.
Oh, I see everyone is. Wowzers, this is a development?
Of course, very, very excited to have both of these shows back on the air, but especially Tuca and Bertie, there was a period of time where we weren't sure where things would go. But I do feel like yourself, the cast, fans kind of stayed optimistic. So Lisa, I'm curious, what gave you hope in that process that there was a future for the show?
I didn't know, it was kind of like having a kid sick in the hospital in a way where I'm like, I don't know if I should plan their birthday party. I mean, that sounds really sad, actually. That was like the most dramatic way I could have described it. I get a little fatalistic, but I think, the drumbeat of the fans who wanted the show to come back, and Tiffany and Allie and Steven all really wanted the show to come back and supported the show, and Adult Swim was really persistent, and I think that all made the difference.
I guess what convinced you that Adult Swim felt right? Like, what made you feel comfortable with the move?
Oh, I mean, right off the get-go, I was like, yes, this show could have been on Adult Swim from the get-go. Like, they really understand animation. They're into experimental stuff. They understand the process. I mean, they like it weird. So it seemed like a very natural fit from the beginning. And it was just a matter of moving the show over.
I'm curious about the process of also just making animation over this last year. I think at the beginning of quarantine, I was like, oh my God, there's never going to be another episode of television again. Like, how are they going to do this? But animation always felt like, okay, maybe there's a possibility there. Like, we can do this while we're all distant, separated, that sort of thing. But Dan, I'm going to throw this to you first. How did the process of making Rick and Morty change over the last year for you?
I think for me, it got more compartmentalized, which I think made me more productive. For the writers, it's like there's a little more democratization that comes with being in the Brady Bunch grid of windows and nobody being able to talk over anybody. You have to take your turns talking. And more importantly, you simply can't work for 6 hours straight while you look at your phone when you're working in Zoom. So you have to respect a little bit more of a kind of, there's an awareness of mental health that comes into play where you're like, you do a 2-hour shift and then you take a nice healthy break. For the artists, I am guessing that it's been a nightmare because I think ironically because of how digital their job had become right before the pandemic, and that I just know that for it's like we default the engine keeps chugging, and then it's like, hey, actors, can you just go in your closet and record these audio pickups? And the answer is yeah, they can. And then once the answer is yeah, they can, then you're going to build your production pipeline around that. And so I imagine that for the kids that are the real geniuses who are working on Cintiq tablets, I'm just assuming, because I'm a cynic, that the end result is probably that they've been working longer hours, and that their bosses are getting away with asking for it. So I'm probably going to buy a couple gift baskets or something after this.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, something you mentioned was in the back of my mind. It's like you do have to put a lot of faith in your cast that they're going to be able to throw a great home studio together in their closet. Like, you got to hope they have a bunch of blankets or something they can throw up. I was just curious, Lisa, how that felt on your end. I think especially diving back into the show and trying to figure out what season 2 is going to look like. How did that all work for you?
I mean, luckily I had a while to think about it while we were kind of in limbo waiting for word. So we really hit the ground running. I knew what I wanted to say. I knew what I was interested in doing with the characters. In fact, I had too much. We couldn't cram it all into one season, which is always fun. And then, our writer's room was really small and intimate, and mostly writers I'd already worked with in person. So it wasn't too difficult to have a rapport with them. I don't know. It was weird working in isolation. Like, I actually really like working from home. It's very comfortable. I hate commuting. But sometimes it just feels like you're on an island. Like, I felt like a Roomba that someone had just pressed on and okay, show run. But I kind of like that. I like having, low supervision.
But like a Roomba, you eventually get caught on a corner in the kitchen and then you're just bouncing up against the wall again and again.
Yeah, and then the Roomba calls its producers and it's like, I need help. This analogy has fallen apart. It was crazy at times to be working during a pandemic and wildfires at the same time. That was a weird time. But It went relatively smoothly considering.
I do think that the Roomba metaphor is actually extra applicable because of how much harder it must be for younger shows to because it's just there's so many more glitches, and if you don't already have a shared shorthand and a momentum to your production pipeline, in which case you can just be like, oh, we can clearly see like what's going wrong because we're working over laptops. But for a new show and a new showrunner, like I can't imagine what it's like for somebody out there who's like who's like making a pilot for the first time and have no way of knowing what they're supposed to expect.
Yeah, if this had been my first season, I don't know how I would have done it. I mean, it would have been impossible. But because I had the experience of doing a season in person and, you know, working on BoJack for many years, it came together pretty easily.
The Roomba knows where the walls are.
I knew where the walls were. I knew where the stairs were.
Great. Yeah, this metaphor is very good. We've talked ourselves back into it. Yes. Another point I want to talk about, I mean, it's really fun to get to talk to the both of you together. I mean, these are both very different shows that kind of have their own set of rules. They both feel like anything can happen, but you know, something that it's not necessarily true that anything can happen. Something that would happen on Tuca and Bertie wouldn't necessarily be able to happen on Rick and Morty. They both have their own internal logic. How do you find that line between what feels real and not real to the worlds you've created, if that makes sense?
For me, it's always been about like, because you don't want to fall into the trap of like plot based, what can happen, what can't happen. I always imagine that what you have to keep consistent is the sort of physics of relationships. Something that should make someone jealous should make someone jealous. And if it does, it doesn't matter if the clock is a cat or, you know, if the episode is a flashback or if someone can teleport today, but they can't tomorrow. It's like that stuff does have its own needs, but like you can get away with anything as long as the characters are relating to each other in a way that the human brain can believe is real.
Yeah, like the surreality is like a dressing on top, but the thing we're supporting it is the story and the true emotions of the characters being based on real life.
Yeah, I think part of what had my brain going down that train of thought was specifically in one of the season 3 episodes of Tuca and Bertie. Bertie imagines Kyle in her mind. Kyle becomes Kyle becomes a part of the world for a little bit there. And I mean, it makes perfect sense for the show, but it's like, oh, can this always happen? Will we always be meeting these imaginary characters then? I
don't know if Kyle will come back specifically, but I think it's always a possibility. Like anyone can kind of do anything. Mm-hmm. I remember there's like a moment in the episode we were having trouble in animation. We were like, okay, all the guys need to spit in this cup. How is he going to get across fast enough? And I'm like, well, he's Kyle, like his arm could stretch. And they're all like, oh yeah, all right. He has stretchy arms. Why not? You know, it's a cartoon and he's also like an imaginary character within the cartoon. So yeah, you can definitely stretch the rules as much as you need to.
Mm-hmm. And if more Kyle means more musical numbers, like please bring him back. I loved that.
I'm glad you like that.
You know, we all have our favorite our favorite cartoons when we were kids, but for the both of you, I'm curious, like what was one of the earliest examples you can remember of seeing animation at work and being awestruck with what animation can do?
For me, it was on Ren and Stimpy whenever something gross would happen and we would zoom into like an oil painting of that gross thing. I was like, you can do that? Okay, that's great. What a way to like use the medium, you know, to the best of its abilities.
I liked Inspector Gadget when I was 10 years old. And I don't know if it was because it was animated or not, but I just loved realizing that I was able to be rewarded for memorizing which of Inspector Gadget's fingers could turn into a flashlight and which of them could have a key. It's like, and that they didn't. I liked when the show respected that logic when they're like, yes, he has a helicopter in his head, and it's always the same, you know, but it can be in his head. Yeah, I guess that was my sort of the thing that was animated that made me so appreciative of animation, because that would have sucked live action.
Also, one of the best opening theme songs of all time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You didn't like the live action one with Matthew Broderick?
I remember.
I never saw it. I didn't see it.
Oh, I did. And I was like, I was pretty young and I went with my dad. I remember he was so mad he wrote a letter to, I think Disney was the company that produced it after. And that is ingrained in my memory that he did that. He was so upset with it.
Oh, that bears its own trauma for you that your dad got that mad about it.
It's the one and only letter he's ever written.
That's really funny.
I wonder if that it's okay for me to have children. I guess I had assumed that because you turned out fine.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been a lot. I've had to talk to a lot of folks about it, but we're finally at a point where I can freely.
I want to see that letter.
Oh my God! Come on, let's go.
On Adult Swim.